Part 1: The Cry Across the Stars. The galaxy was vast, filled with light and life. Stars burned like diamonds scattered in the endless dark, and around them spun countless worlds. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had watched over it all. They were proud of what they had built, a network of peace, trade, and knowledge. Civilizations of every kind lived under the Council's promise of safety. But safety was only an illusion. The first warnings came from the edges of known space. A small colony world, then another, then a third. Contact was lost. Rescue ships were sent, but they never returned. The Council argued at first, thinking it was some local warlord, some pirate fleet, or perhaps a natural disaster. But then a survivor ship limped into Council space. Its hull was torn apart, its crew trembling, their voices shaking as they described what they had seen. A swarm. A hunger that had no end. They called themselves the Virak. They were not diplomats. They were not conquerors. They were destroyers. They did not take prisoners. They did not care for riches or resources. They consumed. They swept over worlds like fire, leaving only ash and silence behind. The Council had never faced such a terror. In the great halls of the capital world, voices rose in panic. The insectoid delegates of the Frawl clicked their mandibles in fear. The gentle Serene, beings of liquid grace, rippled with despair. Even the warrior Theric, known for their pride, looked uneasy. If the Virak could not be stopped, everything would fall. So the Council did the only thing they could. They sent a message, a call for aid, a desperate cry into the void of space, broadcast on every frequency and every language to every corner of the stars. People of the galaxy, the message said. We are under attack. The Virak swarm devours all. We cannot hold the line alone. We beg you, come to our aid. Soldiers, fleets, warriors of every kind. Whoever hears this, know that your galaxy needs you. That message spread like wildfire. Across nebulae, across barren moons, across bustling trade stations, it was heard. Some species ignored it, too afraid to face such a threat. Others sent small offers of help, but nothing that could stand against the swarm. The Council waited and prayed, and then a reply came. It was not from the proud Theric fleets. It was not from the ancient Vale, whose ships gleamed like crystal. It was not from any of the great powers the Council had expected. The signal came from a small blue planet, tucked away in a quiet arm of the galaxy, a world most had heard of only as a whisper, a warning. Earth. At first, the Council laughed. Surely it was a mistake. Earth was a death world, a place of storms, earthquakes, poisons, and predators. No sane species could thrive there. No civilization could survive the endless disasters of that cursed world. In the halls of the Council, delegates shook their heads and murmured that it was impossible. But the message was clear, spoken in calm, steady tones. This is Earth. We have received your call. We will send help. Simple, direct, as if the end of the galaxy was just another task to be handled. The aliens whispered in unease. Who were these humans that they spoke so boldly? What kind of people lived on a planet where even the ground and air fought against survival? In hidden corners of space, smugglers and traders told stories. They said humans were strange creatures, reckless and stubborn, capable of both kindness and cruelty. They said humans fought harder than anyone else because on their world, even a day of survival was a battle. The Council did not know what to believe. But they were desperate, and desperation does not choose. Weeks later, the first human ships arrived. They were not like the elegant vessels of the Vale or the shining dreadnoughts of the Theric. They were crude, angular, and scarred, built not for beauty but for survival. Their engines growled instead of humming. Their armor was patched and heavy. When the humans stepped out, the galaxy held its breath. They were not towering giants. They were not shining gods. They were flesh and blood, scarred by their own history of endless wars and disasters. Their eyes, however, were different. Their eyes were sharp, fierce, and alive with something the other species could not name. The galaxy had called for soldiers. It had called for saviors. But what had come was something else entirely. Predators, survivors, Deathworlders. And though the Council did not yet know it, the moment those humans arrived was the moment the galaxy's story changed forever. Part 3. The First Battle. The warning came too late. The Virak swarm had already reached the colony world at the edge of Council space. Satellites that had once orbited peacefully were now shredded into sparks of light. Cities burned. Communications crackled and died. Panic rippled through the planetary population as the alien defenders scrambled. The Council fleets moved cautiously, coordinating defense lines and protective barriers. Every strategy was calculated, every maneuver carefully considered, yet even their most experienced commanders knew their forces were outmatched. The swarm did not tire. The swarm did not hesitate. It moved as one, an unstoppable tide. Then the human ships appeared. They came not in formation but like wolves moving through a storm. The alien observers blinked in disbelief. They had expected careful tactics, shields and sensors, long-range strikes. Instead, the humans charged forward, engines roaring, weapons blazing. They weaved through debris and explosions as if the chaos itself obeyed them. A Theric admiral muttered in disbelief. They are insane. But the humans were not insane. They were prepared. Their small vessels struck with precision, striking weak points in the swarm that even the Council's fleets had not noticed. Boarding shuttles carried human soldiers who leapt into the Virak ships with no hesitation, engaging in brutal close combat that would have terrified any other species. The alien fleets hesitated at first, unsure if they should follow. Then slowly courage sparked. Seeing humans fight with unflinching resolve, with laughter even when wounded, they joined the fray. The humans became the spearhead of the counterattack. The Virak shrieked through space, a soundless chorus of menace that chilled even the most hardened warriors. But the humans met them without fear. One pilot, a young woman with a jagged scar across her face, rammed her ship into a Virak cruiser that had already torn apart 2 Council frigates. When asked later why she had done it, she said simply, "It was in our way. It had to die." Explosions lit the void, sending fragments of metal spinning across the battlefield. Smoke and fire surrounded the human vessels, but still they pressed on. Alien medics watched as humans carried their wounded into the fight again, refusing evacuation until every comrade was safe. The Theric warriors, known for their pride, looked on with grudging respect, realizing that these humans were something else entirely, something they had never faced before. One Council officer whispered to another, voice trembling, "They do not fight to die. They fight so that others may live." The human strategy was brutal in its simplicity. They exploited the swarm's patterns, forcing the Virak into traps, collapsing their own ships as bait if necessary. They fought not for glory, not for victory alone, but for survival and protection. Every strike, every maneuver carried a weight of purpose that no alien species could ignore. The battle raged for hours. The colony world below was scarred, but thanks to the humans, not entirely lost. Entire fleets had been shattered, yet where humans fought, survivors escaped. Where humans fought, hope returned. Even the Virak paused. It had never encountered creatures like these. Creatures who charged death with open eyes, who laughed at danger, who treated destruction as a challenge to be overcome. The swarm hesitated, confused by the ferocity it had never faced. In the midst of chaos, a young human soldier noticed a small group of civilians trapped in a collapsing building. Ignoring enemy fire, she maneuvered her shuttle through the debris, risking her life to rescue them. Her companion, watch, Ing in disbelief shouted, "Why risk yourself like that? They'll kill you!" She smiled grimly. If someone has to die, it won't be them. By the time the Virak began to retreat, the humans had inflicted damage no other species had thought possible. The swarm pulled back, wounded and wary. The Council fleets, inspired and emboldened, pursued, learning courage from the humans' example. In the aftermath, silence fell over the battlefield. Ships drifted among wreckage, fires still burning in the void. The humans gathered quietly, checking their numbers, patching ships, tending to the injured. They did not celebrate. There was no triumphant cheering, only quiet relief and readiness for the next battle. A Theric warrior approached one of the human leaders. His eyes, usually filled with pride and arrogance, were soft with respect. "Your people. You are not like any I have known. You carry death with you and yet give life as freely. I do not understand it, but I will follow your lead." The human captain nodded simply. "That is all we ask. Stand with us and we all survive. Hesitate and everything dies." Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread like wildfire. Civilizations that had already given up hope began to believe again. Traders, travelers, and diplomats whispered the name of the humans with awe and fear. Deathworlders. And somewhere in the quiet of space, the humans themselves prepared for the next challenge. They did not boast. They did not seek recognition. They only knew one truth. The galaxy needed them, and they would not fail. The first battle was over. The humans had not only survived, they had changed the course of the war. The Council finally understood what they had called into the void. Not soldiers, not diplomats, but monsters. Monsters who fought for life. Monsters who were human. Part 4. The Weight of Humanity. The battle above the colony world had ended, but the echoes of it lingered across the galaxy. Ships drifted among the wreckage, alarms still blaring in some corners, smoke rising from shattered hulls. Survivors floated in stunned silence, staring at the sky, at the void that had threatened to consume everything. And amidst it all, the humans moved with calm determination. Other species watched them closely. The serene medics, usually serene and cautious, whispered to one another in awe. They risk everything for strangers. The Theric warriors who prided themselves on courage found themselves humbled. These humans carried the weight of battle lightly, yet their presence was heavier than anything else in the galaxy. For the humans, this was nothing new. On Earth, every day was a struggle for survival. Every storm, every predator, every illness demanded resilience. They had learned to carry grief without breaking, to endure pain without surrender, to protect others without hesitation. And now that resilience was stretched across the stars, touching worlds they had never seen. In the aftermath, the humans did not celebrate. They tended to the wounded, salvaged what they could from the battlefield, and shared food and warmth with alien survivors. They moved among them like quiet guardians, offering words of comfort, a hand to hold, a shield for those too afraid to move. The galaxy had never known such empathy paired with such lethal skill. A young Cyrene medic asked one of the human soldiers, her voice trembling, "Why do you do this? Why risk your life for beings you do not even know?" The human looked out at the stars, his eyes reflecting the glow of distant fires. "Because if we don't, who will? Someone has to stand between the darkness and the light. We've survived worse on our world. We've seen death every day, so we fight, not for glory, not for medals, but for life itself." The Cyrene blinked in understanding, a soft ripple of color moving across her body. She realized that the humans carried a different kind of power, not the raw strength of armies, not the elegance of technology, but something far more enduring. Hope. It spread quickly. Across every fleet, across every planet under threat, humans became a symbol. Soldiers who had lost everything found courage when fighting alongside them. Civilians who had hidden in fear found strength when they saw humans protect the weak. Entire worlds began to believe again, simply because these creatures of a small, harsh world refused to surrender. The Theric, usually prideful and aloof, were the last to accept it. Their commanders observed humans board Virak ships fearlessly, laughing in the face of death, and realized something they had never learned in centuries of war. Raw courage and determination could be a weapon more powerful than any fleet. One Theric admiral, speaking to his officers in a low, almost reverent voice, said, "These humans, they are death itself, but they are also life. We will follow them, not because we must, but because they inspire us to be more than ourselves." Even the council leaders, long accustomed to weighing every action and consequence, were moved. They had sent a call for help and expected armies, fleets, and strategies. They did not expect human beings shaped by storms and predators to arrive carrying something more powerful than any ship or weapon: unshakable will. Every day, humans trained, repaired, and prepared. They did not sleep in comfort, nor did they demand luxury. They ate quickly, rested lightly, and returned to duty without complaint. Alien observers noted how they laughed even in fear, how they mourned their dead openly, but stood again without hesitation, how they sang songs of sorrow and defiance in the quiet hours before battle. For the first time, the galaxy began to understand something vital about humanity. Their survival was not just physical, it was emotional. They could face loss, endure suffering, and yet continue to fight for others. The Virak swarm, for all its brutality, had never encountered beings who could bear the weight of death without being broken. As humans moved from planet to planet, aiding, rescuing, and protecting, civilizations once resigned to extinction began to rebuild. Trade routes reopened, Cities began to repair and soldiers found purpose. The humans never asked for recognition. They fought and they inspired, silently letting the galaxy see what it had never known. That courage was contagious. One young human lieutenant looked down at a planet scarred by the Virak's attack. She had lost friends, comrades, and the hope of countless civilians. And yet she smiled faintly, hands on her weapon, ready to defend again. Another soldier, noticing her expression, asked, "How can you keep going?" She shrugged, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Because we must. Because if we stop, everything we've saved dies. And we don't give up. Ever." That was the essence of humanity. The weight they carried was immense, yet they bore it with grace and ferocity. They were not invincible. They were not immortal. They were not gods. And yet, in their simple, determined way, they became something the galaxy had never truly understood before. Beacons of life in the face of unimaginable darkness. As the humans prepared for the next battle, alien observers whispered quietly among themselves, Perhaps we have underestimated them. Perhaps these small, fragile-looking creatures are the strongest in the galaxy." And somewhere in the quiet of the human fleet, soldiers shared a brief laugh over a small victory, patched their ships, and sang quietly for the ones who would not return. They did not boast. They did not seek glory. They only knew one truth, and it guided every action. The galaxy had called, and humanity would answer. Because to them, to survive was not enough. To protect others, even strangers across the stars, was the only measure of worth. Part 5. The Turning Tide. The galaxy had waited for a miracle, and the humans were becoming exactly that. Every battle they fought, every fleet they led, every world they saved, shifted the momentum of the war. The Virak had once been unstoppable, a tide that devoured everything in its path. Now they hesitated. Now they feared the name whispered across the stars. Deathworlders. It began on a shattered world, one that had been reduced to ash and ruin. Council forces had given up hope, believing it lost. But the humans arrived. They did not land quietly. Their ships tore through debris, engines screaming, weapons blazing. Soldiers descended, stepping onto scorched ground without hesitation. The locals had hidden, trembling in fear, expecting nothing but death. Then they saw the humans move among the wreckage, lifting the injured, carrying them to safety, facing dangers no one else would. Children clutched at their legs, eyes wide, and the humans smiled gently, offering words of comfort even as enemy drones fell from the sky. One human soldier, a young man with a scar across his cheek, spoke to a frightened girl. "We'll protect you. You don't need to be afraid." His voice was calm, steady, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and somehow in the midst of destruction it was. News of their deeds spread quickly. Soldiers in distant fleets who had once felt hopeless found courage. Civilizations that had prepared to surrender now began to fight. Even the Tharak, warriors who had once doubted the humans, began coordinating with them, learning strategy from their bold, unpredictable tactics. The humans did not lead with diplomacy or speeches. They led with action. When Virak forces cornered a fleet, the humans did not wait for instructions. They struck with precision, drawing the enemy into traps, risking themselves to buy time for others. Every soldier knew the cost, and yet they charged forward, grinning, laughing, daring death to touch them. A fleet of human ships held off 5 Virak cruisers while alien vessels escaped. The council commanders watched in awe as human boarding parties leapt onto enemy ships, engaging the swarm in brutal combat that left even hardened veterans gasping. They were not invincible, but their determination was contagious. The Virak, for the first time, began to fear. Their hive intelligence could not understand such reckless bravery. Their swarm tactics, perfected over millennia, failed to predict humans who seemed to welcome danger, who treated the impossible as routine. Every loss hurt the swarm, and every human victory inspired hope across worlds. One alien officer asked a human captain, disbelief in his voice, "Why do you not fear death? Why throw yourselves into impossible battles?" The human's eyes were steady, unwavering. "We fight because if we do not, no one else will. We fight because hope is worth more than fear. We fight because we cannot stand by and watch the darkness take everything." It was simple. It was clear. and it was more powerful than any weapon. As the humans continued, planets once thought lost began to recover. Trade routes reopened, rebuilding efforts began, and populations started to return from hiding. The humans did not claim glory. They did not parade their victories. They simply moved on to the next battle, to the next call for help, to the next world in need. Across the galaxy, alien fleets began to coordinate differently, inspired by human tactics. They became bolder, more adaptive. Soldiers who had once feared the Virac began taking risks, following the humans into impossible situations, learning that courage was not the absence of fear but the mastery of it. On one moon scarred by fire, a young Cyrene soldier knelt beside a human medic, watching her treat injured aliens despite their differences. "Why do you care?" he asked quietly. The medic smiled, brushing ash from a wounded Theric warrior. "Because life matters. Because we survived together or not at all." It was a simple truth, and one that echoed across the war. The turning tide was no longer just about battles won. It was about morale, about hope, about the belief that survival was possible. Civilizations that had cowered now fought alongside humans, inspired by their courage. Fleets that had retreated now advanced with renewed strength, bolstered by the example of a species that had thrived on a planet where death came every day. Even the Virac realized they were facing something they had never known. They were no longer just fighting armies. They were fighting a force that would not yield, a force that carried both lethal skill and relentless compassion. The humans had become the spark that ignited resistance across the galaxy. At night, aboard their ships, human soldiers shared stories of Earth, tales of storms that could swallow entire villages, of predators that stalked their forests, of fires that destroyed cities, and yet they spoke not of despair but of survival, of laughter amidst tragedy, of strength born from hardship. The alien soldiers who listened began to understand the heart behind the legend, the reason these humans could change the course of war. The galaxy had been waiting for saviors. It had received soldiers. But what arrived was more than that. It was humanity, resilient, fearless, unyielding humanity. And as another Virac fleet retreated, nursing wounds inflicted by humans who had given everything and more, a quiet realization spread through the council. The galaxy would not be the same. Not because humans were invincible, but because they had taught the stars what it meant to fight for life itself. The tide had turned, and at the forefront, as always, stood the humans. Part 6. The Deadliest Stand. The final battle loomed above the Council's capital world. The Virac had poured everything into this attack, a living tide of ships, tendrils of darkness stretching across the void. The galaxy's defenses trembled under the weight of the swarm. Fear spread like wildfire, even among the bravest soldiers. Entire fleets had already fallen before this moment, and many worlds had surrendered in despair. But humanity did not flinch. Their ships formed the front line, engines glowing with deadly determination. Soldiers checked weapons one last time, patched hulls, and whispered prayers or songs from their homeworld. They carried the history of Earth with them, the storms, the predators, the endless trials that had made them who they were. Every human knew what had to be done. The council leaders, watching from the command towers, whispered among themselves. "Can they truly withstand this?" one asked. "Even with their courage, it seems impossible," a human captain replied over the comm channel, voice calm but resonant. "You asked who would come. You asked who would fight. We are here. We are humanity. And we are not afraid." The swarm struck. Thousands of Virac ships surged forward, their shapes twisting in unnatural forms, their weapons lashing out like living spears. Explosions flared across the void. Fire and debris danced in the darkness as fleets clashed, some ships torn apart instantly, others battered but still moving. Human ships charged into the heart of the swarm. They did not hesitate. They did not flinch. They rammed, fired, and boarded enemy vessels with fearless precision. Alien observers could hardly believe what they were seeing. Humans engaged the impossible as if it were routine. When a squadron was surrounded, they fought back to back, covering each other, laughing in the face of death. A young human soldier, barely out of training, leapt onto a Virac ship, dragging his injured comrade into safety, while fending off creatures that would have killed any other being instantly. He shouted to the council fleet, "Go! We'll hold them here! Just survive!" And they did. Inspired, the aliens pressed forward, encouraged by the humans' courage. The Veyrak shrieked in confusion. Their hive intelligence had never encountered this. This was not mere resistance. This was defiance. A species that did not retreat. A species that welcomed impossible odds. A species that carried death within itself, and yet extended life to others. On the planet below, civilians watched the sky in awe. They saw humans boarding ships, rescuing the injured, shielding the defenseless. Children clutched their parents, gasping as human soldiers moved among fire and debris with calm determination. One child whispered, "They're not like anyone else. They fight for us." The battle raged for hours. Ships exploded, leaving trails of molten metal. Smoke and flame clouded the void. Every corner of the galaxy seemed poised on the edge of extinction. Yet humanity pressed on, sacrificing, shielding, advancing. No one faltered. No one turned away. Even when surrounded, even when wounded, they stood tall. Finally, a Veyrak command vessel, the largest of the swarm, approached the heart of the human fleet. Alien fleets began to falter, unsure if they could hold it. But the humans formed a shield around the Council's capital fleet. Their captain's voice boomed over all channels. "Hold the line. Do not break. We are the wall between you and annihilation." The humans attacked the command ship with everything they had. Boarding parties leapt across voids, cutting through the Veyrak defenses with brutal efficiency. Explosions shook both vessels. Fires burned, alarms screamed. The humans, though outnumbered, fought with unmatched skill and relentless will. As the Veyrak flagship fell, the swarm faltered. The hive intelligence could not comprehend such loss. Without their command, many ships retreated, leaving the battlefield in disarray. The humans pressed their advantage, pushing the enemy back, covering fleeing allies, and ensuring no corner of the galaxy was left vulnerable. When the final Veyrak vessels fled, the galaxy was stunned into silence. Stars reflected off shattered hulls and smoke rose like ghostly towers. The humans, battered, wounded, but unbroken, drifted among the wreckage, tending to survivors, comforting the injured, and honoring the fallen. There was no celebration, only the quiet understanding of what had been achieved. A Theric admiral approached a human captain. His voice was low, filled with awe and respect. "Your people, you are unlike any we have known. You are death itself, yet you carry life. You have fought against impossible odds, and yet you survive and you protect others. I do not know how to thank you." The human captain looked out at the stars, at the fleet, at the battered but alive council forces. "We did what had to be done. That is all. If we falter, everything dies. If we fight, hope lives. We chose hope." Across the galaxy, stories of the battle spread like wildfire. The name Deathworlders was no longer spoken with fear alone. It was spoken with reverence. Humanity had arrived, not as saviors in armor or shining ships, but as relentless protectors, fearless warriors, and beacons of hope. In the quiet afterward, humans tended to the wounded, repaired ships, and whispered songs of Earth. They shared stories of storms, fires, predators, and survival. They laughed quietly, even in grief, and they prepared for the next challenge because humanity did not rest, did not yield, and never ever gave up. The galaxy had called for help. It had received humans. And in the end, it was not technology, not strategy, not numbers alone that had saved countless worlds. It was humanity itself. Fierce, unyielding, compassionate humanity. Hope had a face. Hope had a name. And it was human. Part 2. Whispers of the Deathworlders. The docking bays of the Council's capital world were filled with silence. Hundreds of delegates, soldiers, and civilians had gathered to witness the arrival of the new allies. Hope was thin, like the flicker of a candle before a storm. Everyone wanted to believe help had come. But when the ships of Earth descended, unease rippled through the crowd. The human vessels were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They were not sleek like the Veil cruisers, nor majestic like the Theric battleships. They looked patched, scarred, almost ugly. Every line of their hull screamed of function over form, survival over luxury. It was as if these ships had been born in war and carried its memory in every plate of steel. From the shadows, voices whispered, "These are the Deathworlders. They cannot be trusted. Look at their machines, barely held together." Yet no one turned away. Fear of the Veyrak was greater than their doubts. The bay doors hissed open and the first humans stepped onto alien soil. They wore simple uniforms, heavy boots that clanged against the polished floors. Their faces were scarred, their expressions calm but watchful. There was something in their eyes, something that made even the Tharic warriors shift uneasily. It was not madness. It was not rage. It was something colder, something sharper, the look of creatures who had lived their entire history in struggle and had learned to endure it. A serene diplomat, her body shimmering with liquid colors, broke the silence first. "Humans," she said softly, "we thank you for answering our call. The galaxy is in darkness." One of the human leaders, a tall man with streaks of gray in his hair, bowed his head slightly. His voice was steady, but carried a weight that pressed against the ears of every listener. "We received your cry. We could not ignore it. If the swarm threatens you, then it threatens us all. We will fight." There was no speech of glory, no promise of easy victory, just a quiet certainty that sent shivers through the hall. The council welcomed them formally, though unease lingered. Later, in private chambers, the delegates debated endlessly. Some argued that the humans were too primitive, their technology crude compared to the galaxy's great empires. Others feared their reputation, that on a world where even the air, the sea, and the land tried to kill, only ruthless survivors could thrive. What kind of allies would such beings make? But desperation crushed doubt. The Viric swarm had already consumed 7 more worlds. Entire star systems were falling. The council needed warriors, and warriors had come. The humans wasted no time. They studied every report, every recording of the swarm's attacks. They asked for no special treatment, no grand introductions. They simply asked where they were needed most. When alien officers explained the swarm's overwhelming numbers, the humans only nodded. When told of the Virac ships that healed themselves and rammed into enemy vessels, they did not flinch. One alien commander could not hold back his confusion. "Do you not fear them?" he asked. A human woman, her uniform torn at the shoulder from an old scar, smiled faintly. "We fear nothing that bleeds." The answer spread quickly through the stations and fleets, whispered in wonder. Who were these people who looked into the mouth of destruction and still smiled? The first joint operation was planned within days. The Virac were moving toward a colony world, intent on consuming its billions. The council fleets hesitated, unsure if they could hold the line. But the humans volunteered without question. Their ships took the front position. No hesitation. No waiting for reinforcements. The council commanders argued furiously against this plan. How could such a small fleet hold against a swarm? But the humans only repeated the same words again and again. "Stand behind us. We'll handle it." The galaxy had never seen such arrogance, or such courage. As the fleets prepared, the whispers grew louder across the stars. Traders spoke of humans with voices lowered, as if the word itself carried danger. Civilians prayed they were strong enough to turn the tide. Soldiers from other species, hardened by years of duty, admitted quietly that standing beside humans made them feel safer, though they could not explain why. The council leaders, still filled with doubt, could only watch and wait. They did not yet understand what kind of allies had come. They did not yet know that history was about to change. In the quiet of the human ships, soldiers sat together, checking weapons, singing songs from a world of storms and fire. They laughed even knowing death might come. They shared food, stories, and promises to fight until the very end. They were not gods. They were not giants. They were something far more dangerous. They were human. And soon the galaxy would learn what that truly meant.